So what I was just pointing out is that when they say that this Ram Mandir, this Ghotala that has happened is like quite routine in the history of temples in India. What they're saying by that is they're also saying that this is actually as good or as bad a temple as the other.
As any other temple.
What Modi does is that he presents himself like a leader who can bring together all the factions, who is above all the factions, and hence produces a unified front. So that nobody, if you look at it, there's no minister who speaks out of turn. Besides the Ram Bhakts in general, the RSS workers themselves are very disillusioned and in fact on the verge of despair. To the extent that some of them, there is a section of them who is looking to Yogi for deliverance. That Yogi is the person who may rescue us.
Hello and welcome to The Federal. You're watching Conversations with Nilanjan. For the last 43 years, to be very specific, the city of Ayodhya and the Ram Temple issue has been at the center of Indian politics. It went through various phases, none of which I am going to elaborate on, except that in 2024, the temple was formally consecrated and devotees started pouring in thousands, if I can say. In recent weeks, there has been a new controversy over the temple, this time over financial scam. First, in purchasing of land, and secondly, siphoning of the donations and offerings which were coming. I am going to be talking about this entire issue, about how it affects the one movement which has changed the nature of Indian society as well as politics. I am going to be speaking with P.K. Datta, who has been a veteran political scientist, an historian, worn many academic hats, finally retired from the Jawaharlal Nehru University as the professor of political thought. Besides all these positions which he's also held, P.K. Datta has also been one of the co-authors of one of the most important, initial books related to the study of the Ram Janmabhoomi chapter, an iconic book called Khaki Shorts, Saffron Flag. Khaki for the shorts which the RSS wore at that time, for the saffron flag which they wave around even now today. Welcome to this program, P.K. Datta. It's really a pleasure to speak to you and get some fresh analytical perspective on what is happening before us. Welcome to this program.
Thank you, Nilanjan. Thank you very much for having me.
Let me begin with a very basic question. That do you see the eruption of these two financial scams, purchase of land, inflated price being put, as being a momentary challenge for the Sangh Parivar and the center? Or do you think that this would leave a lasting smear on the Ram Temple movement, on the Sangh Parivar, on the center, this entire, combination of forces?
Yeah, it's of course difficult to say that and predict it from this point of view from today. But let me just say that it has been a very, very important development, a very important development in the unfolding of this movement, which, as you said, started in 83 and acquired a new momentum in 24. It's so important because it actually poses a very major question mark to the transformative agenda of Hindutva itself, and especially of the RSS and the Vishwa Hindu Parishad. Now, whether they will be able to overcome the storm or not over time is debatable, but a question mark is very, very major development. And I can proceed with this analysis, if you like, why I think this is major.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, see, it seems to me that Hindutva is premised, is based on a politics of symbols, of symbolism.
Mhm.
It doesn't, I mean, primarily, it's a movement based on, not on, usual kind of political issues such as reservations, livelihoods, regionalism, federalism, and so on and so forth. It's based primarily on symbols. And the Ram Janam Bhoomi is the most important central symbol of this movement. It is important and central precisely because it sanctifies the movement. It is a sense of sacredness that it gives to the movement. Sanctity is the basis of the Ram Janam Bhoomi movement. And it's so in two ways. One, of course, is that it is restoring the sanctity of Ram's birthplace. And Ram being the figure who combines sacredness, devotion with moral virtue that runs a state. So, on one hand, the sacredness, the sanctity of Ram Janam Bhoomi is this promise of a moral, virtuous, divine state,
Right.
a divine country, a new nation. It is secondarily also sacred and sanctified by the fact that it is a movement that was based on erasing the claims of Muslims on this country called India, because this was seen, the Ram Janambhoomi was seen as a symbol of India itself and the future India that could come into being. So it is part of the it's essential to the transformative agenda. Now, this secondary aspect is, it is sanctifying, it is making sacred this whole birthplace of Ram by erasing the Muslim presence. And this gives to the agents, and that's the important point, the VHP, the RSS, the BJP, a sense of sacredness itself. Because it is the agents who are bringing in that change, restoring that promise of the great sacred dharmic nation.
Absolutely now, pure.
Absolutely pure, virtuous.
Yeah.
This particular configuration, this particular relationship between the symbol of purity, which is Ram Janam Bhoomi, and the agents who are fighting for that Ram Janam Bhoomi and restoring it, that relationship is at risk of snapping completely. And that is a very major challenge before the Hindutva movement, because the agent, if it is taken out from the main symbol, then becomes just another agent which is vying for sanctification. It becomes normal, it becomes everyday, like any other political or other secular organization.
Right.
So therefore,
when you talk about, please continue. No, please continue.
No, this, I think, is very, very critical. I would just like to add here that I think the major impact the Ram Janam Bhoomi had, now I'm looking back in retrospect, was precisely the fact that it came in a context, especially after liberalization, of more of ever increasing scandals and stories of corruption, and the stigmatization of politicians as being corrupt. And what we had from the 80s onwards are politicians or leaders coming outside of the political realm who are promising to clean up this corrupt system. VP
Right.
Singh we had, then we had Hazare, then we had Arvind Kejriwal, and so on and so forth. And on the other
Mr.
hand,
Modi,
and
Prime
Modi, of
Minister
course,
Narendra Modi.
I'm just coming
You
to
know,
that, ultimately
yeah.
Modi, and before that, Advani also. Hmm.
Yes.
Uh, but together with that, this climate, this culture of corruption that we seem to be immersed in, the whole country seemed to be immersed in, was kind of came to a climax with the CWG, the Commonwealth Games scandals, the I think the Spectrum scandals, the 2G scandals,
2G
whatever
scam.
its merits, whatever the merits of this is not what I'm concerned with. What was happening was this, this culture, overwhelming culture of corruption that's happening in politics and in the nation state, in the body of the nation. So the sanctity that the Ram Janam Bhoomi promised must be seen in this context. It was very important because it promised a new a pure state of the nation away from corruption, a virtuous nation. So it has to be located in that context.
Yes, while you were speaking, I was reminded of two very specific, very short sentences or descriptive phrases which were used by Mr. Modi through this entire period. One was, his three most important speeches after the Supreme Court judgment from Ayodhya. One on the 5th of August 2020 after performing Bhumi Pujan. Second on the 22nd of January 2024 after doing Pran Pratishtha of the idol, and then again in November 2025 after hoisting that saffron flag, which, over the temple. On all the three occasions, Mr. Modi gave very important speeches, and he described the completion of the temple in November 2025, that now everything is completed as beginning of a new Kal Chakra. That is the phrase, that a new epoch. That is what he said. The other thing is, more specific to the context of, corruption, and in what the backdrop which presented, on what among the various issues on which Mr. Modi he came to power in 2024, 2014, on the basis of his slogan, "Na khaunga, na khane dunga." Now, nobody has yet in this entire chapter said that Mr. Modi is in any way involved in what has happened. But the point is that it has definitely been said that the system which was created, it was a system which was created by the government of India, by the Prime Minister's office, because his former Principal Secretary, Mr. Nripender Mishra, played a very key role in the construction of the temple and also the Ram Temple Trust. So in that context, it becomes very important. This brings me, this not being able to create the structure. Do you think that there is some kind of a problem within the Sangh Parivar of transiting? Mind you, the major part of history, they have been in opposition politics. Ram Janmabhoomi also, 1983 to 2014, it is 40 years plus, that kind of a period that they are, completely, in opposition politics.
Mm-hmm.
So can they not transit to running a system, an authority, create a structure which has standard operating procedures? Here it appears that everything was running in a very ad hoc manner. You have the treasurer saying that he made a statement that I was not there placed in Ayodhya on a regular basis. I would go once in a month and have a look at the audited statements. Is the treasurer's job only to look at audited statements? So there were many questions which have come up. It's very clear that the two people who have tendered their resignation and the third one who has been sidelined clearly says that the system, the institution which was created, was not running as it should have been. And here the failure completely lies at the door of the people who were actually establishing the trust, which was the government of India, which at least as far as this is concerned, was the Prime Minister's office on the directions of the Supreme Court of India. So, do you see this as in some kind of a inability to be able to shift from an ideological agitational phase to a governance kind of a system?
Yes and no.
Okay.
More, you know, I think the real problem has been because, we don't know how the RSS functions. It is not a registered body, it doesn't have a constitution. So we don't know how. But what we do know of it from the outside is that it emphasizes personal contacts and personalized relationships. Because it works in that particular hierarchy, which is not it doesn't generate documents. It is verbal, it is oral in its mode of operation. And it seems to me that what was happening in the Ram Janambhoomi Trust was also an extension of that kind of culture, a culture of oral and verbal commands and personalized relationships based on who you know, who you don't know. Most of them are all part of the Sangh Parivar in any case. So in that sense, what Champat Rai was overseeing as General Secretary was an extension of something he knew, which was the RSS culture within that trust. So that's one major problem. The second major problem is that the RSS, by its kind of almost innate sort of reflexive action, is averse to creating organizations that are accountable to the public.
Okay.
Yeah, because the RSS itself is not accountable. It sees itself.
But you can say that the BJP is accountable to the public. It is, after all, a registered political party.
Correct. But which is the trust? The trust comes from the VHP, Vishwa Hindu Parishad. That is the main. That is the thrust. Now, BJP is always seen, till Modi comes and consecrates it, as an outside agency. Advani comes after the movement has been generated. And he comes and leads it. So he's in that sense the political wing, as it were. But the moral center is the RSS. The moral center of this movement, who will also not desist from correcting the BJP from point to point. So it stands above the BJP itself, Now, the problem here is that the RSS and the VHP themselves don't want any accountable public official to be around. If you look at all the other mandirs, the major mandirs like Tirupati or Kashi Vishwanath and so on, and Siddhivinayak and so on, they are controlled by state legislations and public officials. But the VHP, by its very basic demand, is that there should be no state regulation on temples itself.
Right.
Yeah. So what they want really is a complete removal of any kind of
state control,
and hence of any kind of public control.
Right.
It will be an internal control, as it were. Because RSS sees itself as the moral voice of Hindutva. So it does not require anybody else to dictate morality to it. It can dictate morality to the government in power itself. So in that sense, for these two reasons, firstly, the culture of the RSS, and secondly, the importance of having temples and mandirs outside the control of public accountability, which creates this situation that we have had today.
There is one point which I want to go back to. In fact, when you were talking about the sanctity of the Ram temple, I wanted to just bring out another point. There has been a general belief among the Hindu society, more so, in the 50s, 60s, and even the 70s, that temples are run by very corrupt pandits, pandas, and all that. There have been innumerable, Hindi films, Bollywood films, made by very leading. It's not the parallel cinema which made these films, where temple trusts, temple bodies were actually hit out. They were presented as villains, and that has been there. So the Ram temple was supposed to be a different kind of a temple. Do you think that has now collapsed, that it is now no longer going to be distinguishable from any other temple which people find? Just the other day, there was news in the papers, and it is being followed up by various news organizations about corruption coming up from Badrinath. The
Mm,
Kedarnath Badrinath Trust. There is corruption there also. It
mm,
is nothing new. The
mm,
Hindu devotees have always seen temples as
mm,
virtually, seats of corruption.
mm, mm, mm,
But here was a temple which
mm,
promised, a completely new beginning. But
mm,
then again,
mm,
that is a problem.
mm.
So
I
that's
think,
one question.
mm,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think it's a very important point that you're raising. Actually, at the popular level, Hindi movies. But if you
Mm.
actually go back to the 19th century, the reform movement starts from criticism of the priesthood. So,
Exactly.
so there's actually a very strong movement, through the Brahmo Samaj, Arya Samaj, etc.,
Yes.
etc., etc., Jyotiba Phule, all of them. Ah, a very strong stand which
To take
actually
to take away
questions
religion from corrupt people.
the agents who are who are performing the rituals, who are
Right.
performing all those kind of activities that gives sacredness to the mandir. Hmm. Now,
Right.
what the RSS finds itself, as you very rightly pointed out, is in this position of agents divorced from the main symbol, which I was pointing out, that there were two elements to sanctity of Ram Janambhoomi. One was the main symbol, that is the Ram Janambhoomi itself, and the mandir that comes up on it. And secondly, the agents. They were indistinguishable till now. That's why the RSS and BHP and BJP could command this aura of a divine mission, because the temple was supposed to be a new vision
Right.
of a mandir altogether. It was the vision of a national symbol, which no mandir has ever been,
Mm.
bringing together the nation. Now, it's interesting here also to just remark that some of the, major spokespersons who may or may not wish to be identified as spokespersons of the RSS, they the argument they're making is that this is nothing new. This is happens everywhere. This has happened to all temples. Now, this argument can work both ways.
But this is the trust formed by the government of India. They are handpicked
Correct.
people,
Correct. But who are the members of that trust?
drawn primarily from the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, and
Precisely.
their hand-picked religious leaders.
Precisely. And after the government of India has been, since 2014, and the UP government is there, we know how institutions work in India.
Right.
So, at the formal level, yes, it was the court judgment that sets up the trust, etc. At the main thing, however, is the operational aspect of the trust. Who are its members? Where do they come from? So, and that is from the RSS, and they didn't make any kind of pretense about it. And why should they? I mean, because they were the people who were the leading the movement for the temple. So naturally, they would put it in the forefront constantly. So what I was just pointing out is that when they say that this Ram Mandir, this Ghotala that has happened, this is like quite routine. in the history of temples in India. What they're saying by that is they're also saying that this is actually as good or as bad a temple as the other
as any
ones.
other temple. So all
As
the
in,
claims that Mr. Modi made on those three occasions that I listed out, he was just kind of, just saying it for
precisely,
the sake of saying.
it is nothing new. There was a promise of newness, which you have pointed out. But
Yes.
now, by their own testimony, they are saying there is nothing new in this.
Yeah.
So
That
that
is
even the defense is something which is very
right.
weak and actually bears out
You
your
know,
point.
right. Now, you talked about, you reminded about the Sangh Parivar's demand for taking temples out of the control of the state. What we are seeing in Ayodhya, after what has happened, we had the meeting of the Temple Trust in which they decided that they shall, they of course, besides accepting the resignation and all that, and essentially trying to pin certain scapegoats so that a systemic failure is not recognized by them. The correction is a three-member panel has been appointed to help them select a CEO, a chief executive
Executive.
officer. Among the three are essentially people drawn from within the bureaucracy. One who is not a career bureaucrat but has been a chairperson of the Sai Baba Temple Trust, the one at Shiddi. Somebody who, this person has a past in the government of India, very importantly also he, as a scientist in the Department of Atomic Energy. So definitely an erudite person, who's just not been part of the religious organizations and managing them. So are we seeing the beginning of the moving out of ideology, because Champat Rai and Anil Mishra were essentially representatives of the ideology. So moving out of them, and in their place, the power gets vested in the hands of the bureaucracy. So it is virtually the opposite of what the Sangh Parivar, specifically the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, has been demanding all these years. To rectify what has happened, does the Sangh Parivar now show that it has nothing else to fall back on but the bureaucracy?
I wouldn't go so far as to say that they are transferring power to the bureaucracy or authority, but it does signify, suggest a certain weakness in their moral authority. Because as I said, that sanctity gave them moral authority. RSS, VHP, BJP, etc. It gave them an aura. Now, and on the basis of that, they could make the claim that all temples should be taken out of the ambit of the state regulations and of public, oversight. What the implication of the SIT is not a judicial body, but it is quote unquote a secular body.
Right.
And this indicates, it indexes actually, not just indicates, it indexes, it is actually actually a marker of the fact that the RSS no longer believes that it has the moral authority to conduct this operation.
Okay.
Now, this marks a very major compromise with itself and its own
Right.
status and its own self-image. Because remember, the RSS, when Mohan Bhagwat, I think, said that he doesn't want to be registered, the RSS cannot be registered because it is the Sanatan Dharma itself.
Yes. Yes. Hinduism cannot be registered.
Precisely. So it
Comparing
is
the
above the
RSS with
state.
Hinduism. Yes.
Correct. So it is above the state, above, in fact, all religious leaders, etc., because dharma is something even larger than everything
But the
else.
inquiry is
But
being conducted
now,
by somebody else.
so we can then make out what it means for their own self-image.
Right. Now, let me go back. Khaki short saffron flags. It's a book we can keep on going back and finding new meaning and trying to be able to understand better what is happening in the present. Now, it brilliantly analyzes to how through this movement they kind of politically enlisted various communities across the Hindu society, irrespective of their caste, class, and various kind of divisions which existed between them. And they were able to unite, and that is why it became possibly the most important mass movement after the national movement, after the freedom struggle. After the temple was formed, and now after this, would that kind of energy, that kind of unity be seen? Because we have seen uh, fairly desperate efforts at the same kind of what we used to say chunavi ganit. uh, there used to be this person called Kameshwar Chaupal who was a member of the trust. He was a Dalit by birth. He was also the person who you would remember that had performed uh, Shilanyas in November 1989. That was the first message which Vishwa Hindu Parishad and the RSS sent out of being able, that we have been able to build unity of among Hindus across caste.
Right.
Now he died some time ago, so a new and a new person had to be brought in, somebody who was already a part of that. So who becomes the co-convener? A gentleman called Krishna Mohan, who is again a Dalit. So it is again that kind of a symbolism. As you said, it was very important to the VHP right from the beginning, as far as this movement was concerned. Even with this symbolism, would they be able to build a political unity across caste, especially on the issue of unity of on the basis of unity of identity? The politics of identity, which they played so well, would they be able to be united as far as that is concerned? Because that
See,
remains
I'm
possibly
sorry.
the most potent force for them even now, because of several questions about the performance of the government.
Yeah. See, I think there are two issues. One is the kind of idea of symbolism, of representation given to symbolic representation given to certain communities, which is a normal practice of the Congress, of other parties also. But the other, even much more important thing, element of the RSS in when it was in opposition and it was, leading this movement, the VHP, RSS, BJP, etc., especially the RSS above all, they had very dedicated cadres, ascetic minded, dedicated, going to the northeast where there's almost no kind of
Yes,
possibility of getting, you wouldn't have thought that, the RSS will go to the northeast and create a base there.
yes, but
But
they
you
did.
want to have pioneers to do that. And when one forgets that the RSS shakhas, they work very hard at the ground level, unlike most other political parties.
Still do.
They still do. Now, this was a very important thing. You give political, symbolic representation, but it has substance because you've been also working with communities, right? Now, why do you work so hard? Why do you work so selflessly? It is a voluntary organization. It's, when they were out of power, you are working not because you're going to get immediate power or patronage, but because of certain self-driven goals which you identify with the RSS. huh, which is supposed to be selfless, you're supposed to be ascetic, and so on and so forth. Right. But once in power, and the way the RSS has gone about it is also that you are become part of an institution of power of patronage. And that I'm finding in even everyday life around me, institutional lives around me, is becoming corrupting in inverted commas.
Okay.
Because there's patronage, there is factions, there are the ins, there are people who may have been of the older generation, and the younger people who come in. And you remember, RS has been expanding massively. So you're getting
Right.
a lot of new recruits who are not as well trained as they were earlier, and who are being attracted by the power of the RSS rather than the selflessness of the RSS in that sense, So it becomes then, this Ram Janambhoomi affair then raises a major question mark about the selflessness of the organizations within the organization itself. That's why I'm saying the self-image is very important, because it's a voluntary organization. So once you don't have that, then the representatives become purely symbolic. The workers, the sevaks, the RSS pracharaks, etc., they start losing confidence in themselves. Precisely because so much of them basic kind of movement which inspired them is now seen to have clay feet. That is, the Ram Janambhoomi is now associated with corruption, which they couldn't have envisaged in a public sort of sense. Right. So it is then a moot question whether they are able to kind of galvanize energy for a movement that will be forward looking. Modi, I think, tried to do that in 24. That we are now going to establish basically Hindu Rashtra. That phase of the movement for Hindu Rashtra is over. Now we are about to establish Hindu Rashtra. So that was a galvanizing kind of.
But that didn't work in 2024.
It didn't, and now it's going to even work less. Because what we have now today is not just the Ram Janambhoomi Ghotala. We now have the NEET, we have ethanol. If you look at, I was looking at the June issues of many of the newspapers, nearly every second day there is a new kind of scam that is being alleged.
A new paper leak.
Something else. The state government in Madhya Pradesh is doing something. There's always something small, but also these large ones. So it's also, in a way, you're returning back to the 80s, which had.
You're returning back to the period of the UPA. What you listed out.
Precisely, to which you were an alternative. Which you posed an alternative, but you're becoming just like in any other political formation, just as you're becoming like any other mandir.
True.
So this is a major problem they have to get over. I don't know how they're going to get over, but it's not that I can forecast that this is the end or anything like that, because they have enormous resources and they have incredible intelligence also. So Ainda doesn't know how they're going to get out of it, but it's a very major challenge and a big question mark.
There's also this issue which you have spoken about in one of the recent interviews which you gave to a website on the occasion of 100 years of the RSS, as part of the conversation. You talked about the emergence of an individual, the individual as against the institution. In the RSS, it was always said that the Vyakti or the individual is not as important as the Sanghatan, always said. But 2014 onward, it has not been the case. The RSS has had a problem with Modi because of the promotion of the Modi cult. To what extent has this entire episode, do you think, is a result of the individual becoming more powerful and more omnipresent than the institution? The RSS at one point was the moral monitor, if I may use the word. But in this case, it doesn't seem to be in a position to be able to do what it used to. At least during the Vajpayee period, we remember that the number of times the RSS, would insist on the government changing its policy to come back to what was part of the RSS, be it on economy, be it on national security, various matters.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not 100. I mean, you could be right that there is a culture of quote unquote individualism that's creeping into the BJP because of Modi, the symbolism of Modi being the only leader. Uh, on the other hand, I would also observe that, before Modi came into the scene, the BJP was deeply divided between Modi and Vajpayee at that period.
Yes.
It was full of factionalism. Now, what Modi does is that he presents himself like a leader who can bring together all the factions, who is above all the factions, and hence produces a unified front. So that nobody, if you look at it, there's no minister who speaks out of turn. There's no, the press is, in fact, the media is completely starved of any kind of information from within the BJP RSS.
Right.
Yeah, unless they want to give you what they wish to. So there's actually been a consolidation, it seems to me, under the central leader. But what has not happened is the kind of moral purity that was promised. Because what you have is a huge amount of inequality that is going on. The number of contracts that the state is giving to a number of favored businessmen, and this culture of kind of working in an organized way, but working not for, working in a way for, more profits, more gains, more money that is coming in, more power that is coming in as a consequence of all of that. And that is what I think has seeped in to the RSS itself. So it's not, so it's not as if the organization has become individualistic, but what may happen as a consequence of this, and what may already be happening, actually, from what we can see in the responses to the Gutala, it's been BJP people who've been coming up, and is that the phenomenon of factionalism. That is something that is, I think, a major. I can only see it from the outside, so I wouldn't know what's happening inside the RSS. But I would assume that this is be a very major impact of coming into power itself, which the RJP, that is the Ram Janam Bhoomi Mandir Gutala, has actually brought to the public. I should just mention here that there's a wonderful interview of Sheetal Singh, who was in Ayodhya.
Yes.
In one of these TV channels.
The veteran journalist from Ayodhya.
Correct. So he was reporting from Ayodhya, and he was saying that one, the people are too scared to talk.
Yes.
This is after the SIT and all of that. It's a few days ago, maybe last Friday or something like that. That's one. But when they do talk, they are critical of the government, critical of the Nagpur, Delhi, Gujarat connection.
Nexus.
And RSS, I mean, besides the Ram Bhakts in general, the RSS workers themselves are very disillusioned. And in fact, on the verge of despair. To the extent that some of them, there is a section of them who is looking to Yogi for deliverance. That yogi is the person who may rescue us. So it's a very interesting kind of
Yes, it is.
scenario
It
that
is.
is also unfolding.
It is actually very interesting, and the mention of yogi, is actually opening a new chapter. We shall keep looking at the evolution of Yogi Adityanath and whether he has any space within the RSS BJP, given that he is a man from outside, a lateral entry into the Sangh Parivar. Well, thank you, PK Datta, for taking us through a lot of layered conversation, pointing out various things. We have really been able to understand, and we definitely understand that the RSS and the BJP and the government of India is definitely going to face a lot of challenges. How they are able to negotiate it, obviously, very difficult to say at this stage, but we shall keep our eyes and ears open. And if the need be, I will reach out to you once again in the coming months to take a
Certainly.
fresh look at
And thank you,
what is
Nilanjan,
happening.
for
Wonderful.
conducting a really rich, illuminating conversation. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.